Hey everyone, so today James and I are going to talk about how to be productive in your life and work. And I think we're going to focus on checklists, calendars, some automation software, things like that. So how do you be productive on your daily work and business?
Yeah, not like we're picking a small topic here, but that's okay. The point is the topic might be big, but the tools that you are able to help yourself be successful are themselves small. So it's simple tools that are powerful here because you can turn them into habits. That for me is something really wonderful about how to make productivity work for you. You don't need to take giant steps. You can take small steps, and just as long as you do them consistently over time, that's the trick. I spent probably the bulk of my career, Randy, learning how to be more effective. It was a lifelong journey for me because I started out working really hard. When you're working 100-hour weeks and you still have more work than you can ever get done, you become, by necessity, a productivity guru. And I looked around and said, well, why are some people more successful than others? And oftentimes it didn't have anything to do with that person was smarter, that person uh, had raw talent in a different degree. It had to do with the way people organize themselves at work. So I hope we're going to get through some of the things that you've learned, some of the things that I've learned. It's partly a mental attitude. It's partly, though, really things like a checklist, automation, software, and tools. So what are the ones that come to mind when you think of your favorite productivity tips?
Well, I do like technology a lot, but I don't think technology has really helped me in this in being productive, because I mean, up until like 2 years ago I used a notebook, and every page was like a list of everything I needed to do, and everything I didn't get done I moved to the next page for the next day and added anything else that was new. And the reason I have done that until 2 years ago was because I tried apps and they just didn't do it for me. I tried an Excel spreadsheet, but I just have just, especially as much traveling as I was, originally you couldn't even put Excel on your phone. Now you can do that too, but it wasn't the same. And so I just went back to my notebooks. And the only reason I stopped 2 years ago is because I got the Remarkable, and it's basically a digital notebook that I can write on and cross things out. And so basically, I haven't changed anything. I just got basically a digital notebook that I can carry around. But none of my I make lists for everything. If I have a project, I have a list of things to do. I have always, I think you mentioned already that the list never ends. It just keeps getting longer, or you may knock one or two things off, but two or three things replace that. So I always focus on like the top three things that I need to do. So at the end of every day, or if I forget or get carried away, then when I wake up, first thing I do is make my list for that day of everything that I have left to do in my life. And then I highlight the three things that I want to get done today, and I will be successful. That's what I look at it. I'm like, if I get these three things done today, then I have had a successful day. And if I decide I'm too lazy and I want to watch TV, or I want to, my girlfriend says, hey, let's go to a movie. If I got those three things done, then I don't feel guilty. I just, whatever, I just kind of roll with the punches for the rest of the day.
I like that. And I want to emphasize the two takeaways from that discussion. One, technology. The way I think about this is use technology if it helps you, make it work for you. And the types of technology that you should consider are, hey, guess what? A piece of paper and a pencil is technology. It's something we invented quite a while ago, but it's an awesome tool. So there's nothing wrong with making use of the tools that work for you. Yeah, you should occasionally consider, is a better tool come along in the meantime? Is your electronic notepad got a lot of benefits over the paper one? But if you say, hey, the paper notepad is great for me, then that's the technology for you. And the second point is, and it's probably, if you took away nothing else from this, I would agree with your habit of looking at your priorities and adjusting your priorities or reevaluating them daily. If you can come up with your, hey, at this moment in time, these are the top 3 priorities that I should be working on, and then actually work on those top 3 priorities, you are ahead of at least 90% of people. That was the biggest distinguishing factor I saw at work and over my whole career about what made people successful or not. The ones who could really genuinely look at their list of priorities, adjust them, and then work on the things that are on your list. It's one thing to know what's most important. The place that I see people fail is, all right, I made my list of priorities, but before I start working on number 1, I'm going to watch a YouTube video or answer an email or do something that's not on my list of priorities. That's not how it works. You make your list and then you follow your list. And by the way, if you do that, the hour of good quality time you spent on your priority list frees up the rest of your day. Yeah, then you can, eat Doritos and watch TV if that's what you feel like doing that day. So I like that, and I would support it. And I would say I see a great deal of power in keeping things simple. And the simplest thing you can do is identify what's important for you at this moment in time. How did you go about, and how do you go about, let's explore it a little bit, coming up with your priority list? Is it always in your head? Do you have a master plan somewhere that you refer back to? How do you know what to basically prioritize at any given moment, in other words?
I mean, I keep it in categories. And when I was in the military, it was a lot easier because people were giving me stuff to do usually, and I just put it on my list. And I'd have a big whiteboard, and I'd have it, sections of the whiteboard for different, projects I was working on. And I also found when I had people working for me, which was pretty much for the last 20 years I was in the military, giving them, hey, today, this is the priority, get this done, and then come back to me if you finish it. But giving them priorities, because especially people who are new to the work or, new to the military, or you're always getting a kind of influx, outflux of people with different amounts of experience, having them get focused. So because they get overwhelmed. A lot of people get overwhelmed when they know there's like 500 things out there. They just kind of wave around at the butterflies and they don't actually get anything done. But as a supervisor, I know what my supervisors are concerned about, and I also can prioritize a little bit better and say, if we don't get this done, a lot of other dominoes are going to fall down. So I used to have meetings every morning, and like, all right, these are the priorities of work today. That's what we used to call them, priorities of work. I learned this as a ranger, because in ranger school, when you're patrolling, you have security out and you have priorities of work while you're in a circle in the jungle, everyone pointing their gun out. And everyone can't just point their gun out for 24 hours while you're there, planning and resting. So you're like, hey, 50% pull security with their gun out, and the other 50% clean your gun, because we've been walking all day through the desert. And then as soon as you're finished cleaning your gun, switch, and the other guy cleans his gun. And then as soon as that's done, then switch, and that guy eats. And then they switch, and then they eat, and then they go back and forth. And then you have to make the priorities of work make sense. And after time, everyone who's working together kind of knows that in the Ranger Battalion. But when you get into kind of a office setting, it may be not as clear to the people that are underneath you what's the priority for the people above you, and you have to make that connection. I think that's served me really well.
I love hearing about the parallels between military operation and business life, because I hear parallels in what you're describing, Randy. I can give a little bit of a visual picture, a hierarchy of how to distinguish between and figure out your daily tasks, your daily priorities. And it starts with understanding your high-level strategy. So the one thing that your company or your organization is trying to achieve, you should know what that strategy is, because that drives pretty much everything else. Underneath your strategy, you'll have 4 or 5 goals, right? So this is what we're trying to achieve, and here's the goals. You can't have a lot of goals, because then already the more goals you have, the less likely it is you're going to achieve them. So let's say anywhere between 3 and 10, 5's not a bad number. Underneath each goal, you're going to have a number of projects. Okay, to achieve this goal, we're going to have this project and this project and this project. And then underneath each project, you're going to have countless individual tasks. So when we talk about setting priorities, if you haven't already done it, you got to think first at the strategic level. So what is the overall mission? We're trying to oust the Taliban. We're trying to grow by 15%. There's a big vision and strategy that is motivating your entire organization. What are the sub goals underneath it? Spend only $100 billion this year, expand in this market. They'll be your key goals at that moment in time. Then you can differentiate down project level by project level. If you've done that work of strategic thinking and you know the high level goals you're working towards, then the prioritization becomes much easier because you can say, okay, the most important thing I have to work on right now is goal 2. And under goal 2, I've got 2 projects going and one project is running fine. The other project needs some help. And then you've got a specific task. And it's not just a task that you've picked randomly because you've got hundreds of tasks you could potentially work on at any given point in time. It's a task that you say, I know exactly how this supports the strategic goal I'm working towards. This is the most important one to work on right now because this one is going to hold up the next 5 things. If this guy doesn't clean his gun, he's not going to get dinner, and then, et cetera. So we make it sound easy to pick a set of tasks for a given day, to pick priorities for a given day. But for me, the precondition to being able to do that is the time that you've spent with a little bit of strategic thought. Okay, now the most important thing I could be doing is this.
I agree with everything you said. And technology, the only thing I've ever used technologically is my calendar, which has been a lifesaver in the last 3 months. And it gives me the reminders and stuff. But
Tell us more about your calendar, though. That's a good one. I like that because I find I use the calendar in combination with setting priorities and tasks. But how are you meaning it when you say the calendar?
I don't, though. I have all my tasks in I look at the calendar when I make my next day's tasks. And so if I have to prep for a podcast, for instance, I'll be like, hey, I need to look at the podcast topics, half an hour beforehand or something like that. And I'll write that on my list of things to do. So I'll use the calendar just as kind of a prompt to what I need to do for the day. But I mean, I also have a partner in my business, my editing and writing business. And for us as a team, I send the priorities of work every day out to her. I'm like, hey, these are usually there's supposed to be 3, but right now there's 5. I said, these are the 5 things we got to get done this week. They're due. And then I have at the bottom, I used to put the next thing was all the things we have on our plate for the next 3 months. But even that overwhelmed me. There's 20 things. I got 20 clients and various things that are going on that we're communicating with emails and stuff. And it used to be right after the top 3 to 4 things we got to do today. And it's very intimidating. And we don't have to read it every day because I read it every day to see what I have to move up there. But I ended up putting it at the bottom of the email so it didn't intimidate me and her. And instead, the next one I would put what we completed last week. So, give us a kind of a positive thing. And then I put calendar events coming up that are on our calendar for the next 2 weeks. And then I would put this monster list at the bottom. That was just something to keep track of because I used to keep track of it in a Google Doc that we shared, but neither of us ever looked at it all the time. So things just started falling through the cracks. It was a really cool document that changed color with the date as the date got closer. So, but it was too much to look at. And an email every morning when you wake up, you're like, oh, those are the 3 things I need to do today. And it helped my partner a lot. She was very grateful. She's like, thank you so much. Your Google Doc was intimidating. It changed colors. I didn't know why. So that's the way I've been running my life for the last 3 years. And I learned most of it when I was in the military. But my calendar in the military was a big block calendar that you put on your desk, and it had all this stuff, you big blocks that you could put for each date, everything. And I also used the Microsoft calendar as well, but that was before I had a smartphone.
So I like that. I like the discussion of what happens when you focus on just what you need to do and don't look at the 10,000 things that are coming, but you don't need to do right now. And to pay attention to the psychological impact of the different ways that you present information. It's a real point. Whether you feel empowered or overwhelmed is maybe just a fine line between, okay, I'm going to go this way or this way. What will work for you and the circumstances you're in will be different. So don't take what you and I are describing now as this is how you have to do it. We're hopefully going to give you some inspiration. Let me tell you a couple things about how I learned to calendar and how helpful they were to me. I first started using the calendar religiously as a way to block time when people wouldn't drop in on me unannounced and schedule meetings. So I came late to exercise. I was in my 30s. I was fat and out of shape. And I had an epiphany at one point. We're going to talk about this in a future episode. But one of the ways I helped get fit was I just blocked a 2-hour schedule in my calendar every day from 11 to 1. And I said, all right, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something during that time. And people then could see in my calendar, oh, I can't book a meeting with James at that time. I don't know if he's at lunch or what it is, but that was the first way I learned to help myself, by using the calendar. Another way that I learned to help myself was a variation of what you said, which is a little reminder. Okay, I need to work on this at that time. So I'm just going to say, okay, well, I got to look at the podcast notes before I get on with Randy. And so those are sort of not for everything, because you're doing stuff all day, but for you figure out which are the right kinds of ones to do that in. And then I developed first an analog method, which I'm going to describe, to support that calendaring to help you be organized during the day. In addition to the calendaring time for fitness, the one that helped me long-term quite a lot was calendaring time for the strategic thought I was mentioning before. So how do you really know what your strategy is and what your high-level goals are that you need to be working towards? I said, and I believe this, that you need to really have a clear idea of what your strategy is before you can go off and productively work on tasks. I found that the strategy doesn't come by accident. It doesn't come by itself. It only comes after careful, determined thought. So I wouldn't do strategic thinking all the time, but I needed a couple hours a week, a day, a month, to check in and make sure that my strategy still made sense, because I had to align it with the company strategy and communicate it to my team members. So your ability to send those notes to your partner about here's what we need to do today is a function of you knowing the high level strategy. Here's what I'm working towards. And I assume that takes you some time as well, at least in my case, using my calendar to say, okay, this Friday afternoon, I'm blocking the whole afternoon to work on the legal strategy, was a really helpful use of the calendar. So blocks for fitness, blocks for strategy, and then these little blocks to help get tasks done during the day. For a long time, I had a much simpler method, and I still used it right up until the end of my career, which was what I will call the 3-pile method. I just had 3 piles. The one pile was stuff I have to get done today. The other one, right underneath it, I use these little plastic colored folders, stuff I need to get done this week. And then the third pile, which was often quite tall, was everything else. So I really distinguished between today, this week, and everything else. And at the end of every day, I would figure out, okay, what has to go into the today pile for the next day? What's made its up into the weekly pile? And then everything else is really just everything else. And the one tweak on that was that I learned never to put anything into any 3 of those piles without also having a calendar entry. So I would say, all right, I don't know exactly when I'm going to work on something that got stuck into the everything else pile, but I'm going to schedule a time a month out to just double check. Do you need to focus on this again? Because the stuff that was in the daily pile and the weekly pile, I would work on because it was right there in front of me. The stuff in the everything else pile, there was a risk that it would get lost. So that little system, and it was completely manual. I would print stuff out, even if it was an email I needed to respond to, I'd print it out and put it in the today pile that said, okay, today you got to respond to this email. Helped me keep on track and not miss things, and really made me feel like I was, being productive.
That's a really nifty tool, and I wish I'd done that in the military, because I did it, and it would have made things a lot easier. But I have adapted something like that to my emails. I clean my email box out every morning and every evening, and sometimes during the day if I'm near it. But and basically I have a bunch of folders, and if this is just good to know information that I may need to refer back to, but I don't need to do anything with, then I'll stick it in its folder with its name, name or category name or its actual name with whoever sent it to me or the subject or something. But then I have this other folder, which is like, I call upcoming, and I just say, okay, if I need to do something today, it stays in the inbox. So I look at it, it stares at me and says, you haven't finished emptying your inbox yet. If it's something I got to do I could do next week, I'll put it in this folder called next week. And if it's something I have to do by the end of this week, I'll put it in this week. And I put it in there, and every weekend I'll wake up in the morning before I do anything else. I'll open that folder, the this week folder, and I'll just go through them and either take care of it or delete it or put it in a folder. Whatever reason I put it in, I had to do this week, I'll knock it out. And then I'll glance at the next week folder and see if I can put it in this to next week's folder, this week, I start the this week's folder then after I empty it, or I can leave it into the next week because I haven't figured out what to do with it yet. But I empty, I mean, every morning I do my priorities of work for my partner and send it to her. And then I empty my mailbox just like that.
So I love it. And what we're describing here is not so much you should copy Randy's system or my system, but you should come up with a system that works for you. If you're in any kind of situation where you have lots of inputs, and that pretty much describes everyone who's working today, you don't want to get overwhelmed by it. You don't want to get distracted by looking at the wrong things at the wrong time. So come up with a system. And I think what you've just heard from Randy and I, they're not sophisticated systems, right? It's a little bit of, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, or on a periodic basis, make sure that you're keeping track of everything and dealing with it on a real-time basis. That'll go a long way towards not only making you feel like you've got control of things, but also genuinely you'll be very productive because you'll be focused on the right things at the right time. I'm wanting to summarize a little bit the flip side of this, Randy, as when you have a system like this and when you set priorities, what you're really doing is you're allowing yourself to avoid being distracted. You're allowing yourself, by checking your emails twice a day, in the morning and in the evening, you are allowing yourself not to be distracted by stuff that comes up in the meantime. Something Steve Jobs said about why he had been successful, about what being able to focus and prioritize really means. And he said, look, learning to prioritize does not mean learning what to say yes to. It's learning the ability to say no to the other 990 things that are clamoring for your attention. So in a way, these systems that we're discussing, I think of them as ways to, I pick the right things to work on, but then I create a system that allows me not to have to worry about all the other stuff because, hey, I set my priorities for the day. I got my 3 things on my list. I set my other 3 things to my partner. That's what we're going to work on today. Now, there's one adjustment I need to make to that, which is depending upon the job that you're in, whether you're in an active war zone or you're in a different kind of war zone, which is I'm on the same floor as my CEO and he can walk down the hall and pop his head in my office. You have to allow for some flexibility in your system to adjust your priorities. A crisis comes up, something happens. It's not that you set priorities and then never change them. In fact, what we just described is we change our priorities all the time. But in general, if the system is operating correctly, it gives you a lot of mental space to say, I'm working on the right things, and I feel comfortable going ahead with today's plan.
I usually make my plan for the next day between 9 and 10 at night. And I may stay up for a couple more hours. And if my girlfriend's watching a show I don't want to watch or something, then I may start tomorrow's early. And like, okay, I did my priorities of work for tomorrow. I did, I knock out like 5 things that some of them weren't my top 3 priorities, but there were things that I was going to have to do if I finished them. And I'll knock out a lot of those things. I'll feel really good about myself too. It's like, I only got 1 thing to do tomorrow. But the other thing I wanted to mention was automation. There is some really good software that can help you with workflow. For me, because I work for myself and I send invoices out and I receive payments and then I send contracts out to get signed and things like that. I've been using Calendly, and I know there's another one called Debasso. No, I can't remember the name of it. It starts with a D. I'll have to look it up. But Calendly, it's actually starting to do workflows where if I send a contract to somebody, they get an email that says, hey, sign it right here, and it'll automatically come back to me. And once Dubasso is the other one. Once it receives the contract, it sends the invoice. And then once they get the invoice is paid, it'll alert me, and then I can start the work. So that saves me, I don't know, half an hour, because it's all in templates already. I just have to input the guy's name once, a date, and an amount, and that's it. And I used to spend like an hour on that kind of stuff, typing it out in, Word and saving it as a PDF and sending it to them, and then, making sure the money came in and stuff like that. So now Calendly and some of these other services, you can connect your Stripe account or your PayPal account. This is for, self-employed people, and you can get all that stuff kind of workflowed. And I'm sure there's other software for other industries and jobs out there too, that people are making amazing stuff all the time. So
I used to have my teammates come and ask for the company to buy some software package, some tool that was going to automate a process. And I almost always said no, because it's partly the cost, but it's also the learning curve of adopting a new tool. And for any bigger organization, and I know you were talking about, you yourself and optimizing your own processes. I'm going to come back to that. But in a bigger organization, the opportunity cost of adopting and learning a new tool is really high, because we got tons of tools and we got tons of processes. And why should I spend money and devote training resources to getting people to learn yet another one? I was probably a little bit too critical of it, because now working for myself, I do see the beauty of tools like the ones you're describing. And in my core work, I absolutely embraced the idea of systematizing routine work. So the rule of thumb that I came to think of was anything that you do a few times, you shouldn't bother investing a lot to create a tool or a workflow to help you. But if you do it repetitively and it consumes any amount of time, then yeah, that's a candidate that's worth considering. Is there a tool that's going to help me? If it's just a one-off thing, I got to put in a couple of hours and get it done. Well, of course, you're just going to do it and get it done. But if it's an hour a day, a week, and you do that 50 weeks a year, then for sure you should consider whether you can get a benefit from automating it or automating a workflow.
So DUBSADO is the other one. So Dubsado has really good workflow stuff, but my biggest time saver, was using a software that coordinated calendars between everybody, which was Calendly. I mean, basically my calendar, Calendly sees my calendar, knows when I'm available. So it's kind of like your internal calendar where people
Yes.
can see when you're available. But now all my clients and anybody who wants to talk to me or make an appointment with me can see when I'm available, and I can set up the hours and the days when I don't want to work. Like I blocked off today till the January 2nd as Christmas time. I'm not going to see any clients. And so that's blocked off my calendar in Calendly, and no one can make any appointments during that time. And I also am able to kind of make a European calendar for my European clients and an American calendar, so that people aren't trying to get on my calendar. I want to be available from American clients because that's where I get most of my work from. But I also don't want to stay up to 4 o'clock in the morning every day. So I try to set it up just for 1 or 2 days a week where I will do that if you really must. You can hook up your Zoom. And so, hey, if you want to make an appointment with me, here's my Calendly. They look in there, they can see the availability I have, so they can compare it with theirs and sign up for me. And then it sends them a Zoom. So now I don't have to go in and make a separate Zoom thing. So that's how that workflow, that simple workflow, that's not even the big workflow with the invoices and stuff, which is more complicated. I'll give you that. And that's why I didn't do Calendly I had my business going for 3 years and I never used Calendly. I just like, when are you available? All right, I'll figure it out. Okay, I'm available during that time too. All right, sure. Here's a Zoom link. And I had to go in and do that. It took like an hour to figure it all out, back and forth. When are you available? I'm not available that time. Are you available this time? Back and forth. And then the Calendly just solved that problem. It was the best thing I ever did for my business. I learned it in like 15 minutes. And so in that way, the workflow, the invoice stuff, I haven't actually mastered that. I used it once and I'm like, yeah, but the just the consolidation of the calendar and the sending the Zoom link is like, my world changed.
Yeah. The difference between setting up a meeting, looking at people's calendars who are internal to your organization, where everybody can see everybody's, and people outside of your organization. So by definition, everyone who's doing any kind of freelancing work is enormous. And it's such a huge time waste. There was the product called Doodle, which came out years ago, which is just a way to do a poll basically. And all right, here's proposed dates and when can everybody meet when you have a bigger meeting. And that was already great compared to the emails back and forth. And so Calendly, as you're describing it, and you and I have used it as well, of course, is that much better. What I would say is, in your own circumstances, if you're looking to optimize or to get better and more productive in your own work setting, it's helpful to focus on your pain points, things that frustrate you, take a lot of time, where you're saying, I wish, or that you repeat and do over and over and over again. There's so many productivity tools and hacks and apps available that it's worth at least considering. As much as I said it before, I was a skeptic when it comes to saving your own time and it's things that you're doing. Look for where you have pain points today and where you feel like you're doing the same thing over and over again regularly. And chances are good that there's going to be a tool there, like the ones that Randy and I are describing. Calendly, great one if you need to make meetings with other people.
And most of these things have like a 30-day free tryout, hoping you'll fall in love with it. And some of them even have like, if you just do this, this, and this, it's free forever. And they want to attract some of the more advanced stuff to you. I've tried a lot of things out and like went, I don't want, this is too much work. I don't want to learn how to do this. And I don't care. My business doesn't need this that bad. And then, I wish I hadn't resisted Calendly for so long. All my peers were using it for the longest time. And I was just like, oh, well, I guess so. And I tried it and it saved me so much time. So yeah, you're going to have some fails. I'm positive. And then there's also, you're going to get overwhelmed too. So I would just choose one because you search for them on the apps, on the app center or whatever, and you got like 16 of them and you're like, I don't know which one to choose. Which one's the best? Just choose one and then see if that's something you're interested in. And you're like, well, I wish it had this, this, and this. Well, then you can do a search for, hey, something that does this with this, this, and this, and you may find something that's closer to what you want. But until you try one and know what it's missing for your particular situation, you can't even, you won't even know where you're going.
Right. That's why the advice to just try something out without worrying too much about whether you're picking the absolute best app in the world is good advice, because the reviews you'll get, the people saying, okay, here's this app versus this app, they may or may not have your circumstances. They may not have your issues. So reading in detail about functions and functionality that don't mean anything to you isn't going to help you make a better choice. So ironically, where we normally say get more information, do research, expand your horizons is a way to avoid making wrong decisions. In this case, when it comes to productivity apps, sometimes the best way to get to a productivity gain is to just start small with something that is simple, and then you'll learn right away whether that's something you want to explore further.
Put that on your weekly list.
Exactly. Explore a productivity app. Or at least figure out an area where you might be willing to consider a productivity app. If you don't have any problems, then don't jump into this idea that you need to add new technology. The rule we gave our managers was only use technology if it helps you. It's worth considering. Yeah, there's stuff that's available now that if you haven't been paying attention, it's already different than it was just a few years ago. There's a ton of things that are often freely available to you. But again, don't be tempted into things just because everyone else is using them. If it makes sense for you, use it. If it doesn't make sense, don't use it.
I don't know. Do you got anything else to add to this subject, James?
I would say maybe a word or two on the ability to form habits, because productivity is accumulation of lots of habits. And it's tempting to see the benefit of, I tried this out and it was really great. So I'm going to go look for something else and I'm going to try that out, and to take on too much at once. I found the best success when I really did it a few at a time and then really let it sink in. So you shouldn't be trying something new in maybe I'm just not good at it, but I found better results when I did no more than one new thing every quarter. So 3 or 4 new productivity related things a year is enough to make you an absolute super performer, as long as you do it consistently over time. So this quarter, I'm going to figure out how to use a calendar app. Next quarter, I'm going to figure out how to use an AI chatbot to help me get ideas for stories or whatever it is. If you do 10 of them at once, your brain is going to be all over the place, and it's very difficult to really get the benefit of it. And remember, before I said one of the best ways to improve your productivity is to avoid distractions. Well, learning new productivity tips is itself a distraction. So do it in a measured way. Your timetable might be different. You might be able to handle 3 or 4 at once, whatever, but be realistic about how many new things you can take on. Maybe that's the one addition I would add to this whole topic.
Yeah, I agree. I don't remember where I got this. What I ended up with was just show up. And when I said, hey, I'm gonna row every day. And I bought a rower and I didn't use it for the longest time. And then I read this this essay or something, and basically the end of the essay was like, just show up. You just show up, and then you'll end up making a habit eventually, but if you don't show up ever, you're not going to make a habit of anything. So I would go row, and I'd row for I was like, I got like 15 minutes for my next thing. I'm gonna go row. And my girlfriend was like, you're just gonna row for 15 minutes? It's like, showed up. And then, next time and then I start, and then I think what you said was a really good thing where you kind of put it in your calendar so no one you can block it off. One of the good things is most of my clients are in the States, so I'm awake 8 hours before they are anyway. So they have that free time, which I've allocated to other stuff in my life. So when I allocate actual time where I'm going to do physical fitness, it's a little bit like, okay, what am I doing right now? Oh, I'm supposed to do physical fitness. All right, well, I'll go show up on the rower. And so now I make a pretty good habit of rowing. Like my girlfriend was like, so we're never going to get our value out of this rower, are we? Because you never use it. But I think she's changed her mind.
As I listen to you talk, Randy, I think I can summarize the productivity tips and the approach we're taking to productivity like this. You want to find ways to save time. You want to schedule your time wisely, and then you want to use your time well. That's really what we talked about today. The productivity tips give you hours back in your day. When you schedule time, you're focusing on the strategic things that you say you want to work on. And then within those blocks of time, use your time well. Don't get distracted while you say you're going to be working on one thing. So it does seem to come down to good use of your time.
And just show up.
And showing up, exactly. Use the time once you've got it scheduled. All right, so those 4 things.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time.
All right. Bye, everyone.
We'd love to hear what you think, so please comment on the show with your thoughts. We read all of your comments.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks for subscribing. See you next time.